Welcome, everyone, to This Week in Crypto with the Coin Routes gang. It is February. We're already 1 month into 2024, February 2nd. And why don't we start with the market update? Carl.
Thank you, Dave. Pretty unimpressive week for crypto in terms of prices, despite all the interesting news. We have Bitcoin up 2.5%, sitting pretty at 43,000. ETH up a few percent at 2,300. Solana and AVAX up a few percent. Chainlink, shout out to all my Link Marines out there, up 26% this week. We have Jupiter down 12% from its opening price, which we'll get into. The major news this week in the markets, we're in the stock markets. We have the Dow Jones, the S&P, the NASDAQ all closing at all-time highs. Tech stocks with an absolutely monstrous week. Meta up 20% today alone. You know, Apple earnings coming in, all that great stuff. Gold up 1%. The dollar pretty much flat, and then oil, as we all saw, got pretty much destroyed towards the end of the week amid news in the Middle East. But we're going to cover it all from the Jupiter airdrop to the Bitcoin ETF, Celsius and FTX bankruptcy updates, and we're going to do our best. So, Dave, where do you want to start?
Hey, Jacob, why don't we talk about, so Jupiter is a DEX. For people who don't know what it is, it's a decentralized exchange built on Solana. And it's rapidly gained market share to the point where it's rivaling Uniswap. So considering that, and considering that they decided to airdrop tokens to users of that this week, it was kind of a big event. And it was a big event for Solana and for them. You know, I think it's definitely worth talking about, because I think everyone who had a Phantom wallet, I mean, is that how it worked, Jacob?
Yeah, I mean, first off, just the pure size of it was massive, right? It was a $700 million airdrop. And with airdrops of that magnitude, usually comes a lot of strain on the network, right?
There's Dave's weekly phone call.
My weekly getting spammed in the middle of the
weekly interruption.
Sorry about it, Jay.
No worries. But yeah, as I was saying, an airdrop with this much attention, obviously there's going to be a lot of volume and a lot of strain on the network. Solana, surprisingly, had no issues, no major issues throughout this entire airdrop process. Traders were able to trade it flawlessly. And the only thing that we saw really was Solana gas prices increasing during it. But in terms of impact, I think, one, it means DeFi is becoming more adopted, which is a trend we noticed coming out of FTX and continues to remain strong. And it also shows you the interest in DeFi is bullish for the crypto community as a whole, right? You have these amazing new projects dropping on networks that are stable, have higher throughputs than ever before. And it's not just the fact that the tech is there, it's the fact that people are adopting it and people are interested in it, which I think is the main story.
Yep. I think that's right. And look, for those who people don't have long memories, or maybe they do, but in crypto, the fact that over the years, Solana's had multiple days where people were ready to stick a fork in it because it would go down for 6 hours at a time. It is the fastest of the major level ones. I mean, there's some argument about a little bit of argument around the edges, but it seems to be replacing Tron in terms of stablecoin popularity because of its speed. This airdrop kind of shows that the network can handle quite a bit, and so that's fairly positive. And people in crypto, sometimes they care, sometimes they don't. We'll talk about a story later where they don't, but the actual use of real use cases does matter. So we think it's a good thing, and it's good for the ecosystem. So, I mean, the next story is one that's been ongoing. I mean, I personally, despite having started my career in program trading and ETFs, I'm almost tired of talking about the Bitcoin ETF, but we can't be tired of it because the inflows and what's going on in the market matter. I know, Carl, you have some perspectives on this.
Well, yeah, I think there's been some fascinating updates. First of all, with the outflows that's been coming from GBTC. At one point, GBTC had 64 some odd percent of the entire market share of the Bitcoin ETF. I think it's down to like 32 as of yesterday. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Overall, BlackRock, I believe today had a bigger day in terms of trading volume than Grayscale's, which is another big story where we're seeing inflows into BlackRock and Fidelity's ETF and outflows of GBTC and the legacy ones. And so I think that, like I said last week, until we see these levels kind of stabilize and find some equilibrium across the board, the markets are kind of just going to chop up. And that's kind of what we've seen over the past 2 weeks. And I think will persist until these inflows, outflows start to stabilize.
I mean, there's some pretty interesting data out there. The most important two pieces that I care about are, first, that it's been net inflows now for several days. Not huge, but net inflows. And yes, they're selling in the futures and they're selling in European ETFs. And obviously, Bitcoin is a market like any other. It goes up, it goes down, people sell. There are people who still, we have to digest the fact that we had to move from 25 to 48. And, sitting at 43, it's really a very, very shallow retracement still at this point. It's obviously nothing to worry about. It tells you that there's interest. The second is that it has barely started. What do I mean by that? Barely started. Almost no RIAs have allocated money to it. We were on Crypto Town Hall this morning, and Bitwise was telling us that they are just starting to see the first RIAs scratch the surface in initial dipping their pinky toes into the water, but most are still going through due diligence. They still haven't done the work to get Morgan Stanley and forget Vanguard, because they're trying to kind of taking a hard line, but several of the other retail systems to allow people to invest in these ETFs. And yet the inflows have been strong. In fact, it looks like it's one of the strongest ETF launches ever, full stop. And that matters. And so, there's a lot going on here. It's bullish, but it's barely started. And
Dave, something. So last week we spoke about how we can actually track every little bit of the ETF when it comes. I mean, these things live on public ledgers, and you said to find out exactly how much gold is resting in the gold ETF market, you'd have to break through past armed security guard officers. Well, the Cointelegraph released an article that said something like 3% of the total Bitcoin circulating supply is in one of the 10 all of the 10 ETFs hold around 3% of the total Bitcoin circulating supply. And I think that kind of answers the question about how big of an impact the U.S. market in particular has on the crypto prices. I mean, we know exactly how much crypto, Bitcoin specifically, is in the ETF market, down to the last coin. And I think that is interesting that we're going to have such clarity and transparency in terms of what kind of market share the ETFs actually have over the entire space.
Yeah, I think that one of the other things that's important is people talk about crypto is they worry about regulation, they worry about how crazy the market is, and they like to look at funny stories. So there was a funny story after the Jupiter one. I probably should have mentioned it a few seconds ago, but and this has happened in the stock market many times. But there's an old token out there based on Ethereum that had the JUP moniker. And it basically trades at some like really, really low price. And evidently it went up thousands of a percent. And some 17-year-old trader made like millions before it fell back down. And I laugh at this stuff. And people look at this stuff and they point like, oh, that's why crypto's terrible. It's like, no, it isn't. The same thing happens on OTC stocks.
That's why crypto's awesome.
It's just funny. The difference is in crypto, it's not just someone sitting on a trading desk or a major firm making the money. It could be some 17-year-old kid that makes the money from other people being stupid. But it's amusing. Another amusing story is the right word, is this week we saw a couple of interesting news stories. So one of them that I personally like to kick sand on the grave. I was kind of pissed last year when I saw that Kyle Davies and Zuju were starting OPNX, and evidently they raised $25 million from moron VCs. And I know people who are watching this are going to say, why are you calling them morons? It's like these guys literally scammed the entire market, took down Voyager, took down Genesis, etc., with their ridiculous bets. And now you're giving them money again? I mean, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me as a story. But in this particular case, it's I don't even know what to say. Whose shame is just ridiculous. But I like the story that this week they finally said kaboom, and they're blaming it on the next story, which is that FTX is going to pay out 100% of claims to all their creditors. And we'll get to that in a second. But OPNX was originally going to be a broad-based exchange, not just trading FTX claims, but other things as well as tokens. But it's dying, right? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I kind of like the, what's the old word from, the Lion King, Hakuna Matata. We got to put the past behind us. I think that having all the villains from 2022 going down or being resolved is good. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously it was a necessary thing. The leverage needed to get washed out of the market. All these guys are seeming to be punished in an actual just way, which is positive for our community. Look, I mean, the ETF got approved. We're headed towards regulation. It's time to focus on putting a step forward instead of trying to spin up money for some of the biggest scam artists in the industry.
I mean, it is amazing. I don't know. There was a story that I saw, which I thought was really funny. I think it was Cointelegraph to report. It might have been Decrypt. I don't know. One of the crypto sources reported that people who hold the OPNX tokens are saying, hey, maybe this thing is going to be worth something because it'll turn into a meme. Right? Can't get more degen than that, right, guys?
You never know in this industry. And the second you think you know is the second you missed out on the 100x token. So it's impossible to tell. I mean, it could take one Twitter post and these things go vertical. So, I mean, I wouldn't chalk it up to a long-term profitable investing strategy, but shit, if you have the token, send me some. I'd like to ride the wave.
I mean, all I can say is FTT is still trading at a price. I'm looking at it on screen. It's trading on Binance and KuCoin. It's trading at $1.888. The next news story is FTX is going to pay back the creditors, and they're not going to reboot the exchange. So who's trading these things? I mean, what are they, bubblegum cards? I mean, I don't know. They're not baseball cards. They have value. I don't know what it is. I mean, it's like, can either of you explain that to me?
No, not at all.
I think part of the crypto community has always been, at least in my personal trading, is you maybe do a bit of TA and you click something that has 3 letters in front of it and add a bit of leverage to it. And I think with crypto, that's pretty true. I mean, people are trading. There was the Harry Potter, Obama, Sonic, Inu, or whatever that Twitter coins that came out. Obviously, a Shiba back in last run. You can't predict it. And I think in a lot of ways, it's what makes our industry beautiful because retail has access to these type of pumps, right? So I'm all for it.
It's still crazy. But FTX is actually an interesting story. So they're going to pay back all the creditors. And it's happening for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is they're paying dollars. They are not paying, if you had a Bitcoin, you're getting $17,000 or thereabouts. And if you had an ETH, I think you're getting $1,600 or whatever it was, some small number. If you had Solana, you're getting, I don't know, $14. I don't know what the number is, but it's way below where it currently is. But they're able to claim that they're making creditors whole because the dollar value is going to be whole as of when the date. And that it's a mixed bag. It's good that people are getting their money back, but the reason they're getting their money back is those things have appreciated, and they made you could say smart, you could say lucky, VC investment in an AI firm, and as a result, people are getting their money back. But the thing that you mentioned, regulation, Jacob, I made this point also in Crypto Town Hall, and Simon Dixon and I were talking about it. The fact is that in equities and in other markets around the world, if you have assets held at a brokerage firm, the brokerage firm goes boom, you still get those assets, and because you have title to those assets. Whereas in crypto, because people like Senator Warren continue to block regulation, there is no path for crypto companies to protect your assets. And that's kind of important. And so the lawyers get to determine the rules. I think everyone would like to see a clear path where customer assets are ring fenced. So, in a way it's good news, but it's also incredibly demonstrable. It kind of shows us that we have a world where regulation could be helpful. I'm not saying you would have gotten everything back because this was a theft, right? But it matters.
My heart goes out to the people who sold on secondary claims markets for 10% or 10 cents on the dollar. I mean, still these claims are trading at fractions of what they're going to be worth if you just sit on your hands and wait for the bankruptcy to play its course.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. Although, you know, and you're getting into the 70s and 80s, it's not that bad, especially when there's
Right.
time value of money, because you don't know when you're going to get the money back. But it seems pretty clear that creditors are going to get paid. But,
Yeah.
you know, it is it is what it is. But the fact that they're not rebooting, just so our listeners know, we kind of knew this. You know, we talked to a lot of people in the industry, and we know I've talked to two people who evaluated the exchange. And in both cases, they saw so many bugs, so many backdoors, so many things, spaghetti in the code, that they wouldn't dare try to open it, lest there be some other time bomb in there for something else bad to
Mm.
happen. And that's why they're not rebooting it. Even though there were lots of good features in FTX, nobody was willing to take the risk, even if they rebranded it. So it's just worth knowing for people, because it's been something that's been talked about.
And the other bankruptcy there is to talk about is Celsius. They're going to be distributing upwards of $3 billion out to their creditors, as well as stock into their newly open mining company. Is that right, Dave?
Yeah, that's right. And you know, there have been a lot of people working on this, and it's the same deal there. People who put in money did fine. People who put in crypto, i.e., in not stable coins but crypto, didn't get the value of their crypto back. They got the dollar value from the day that it went bankrupt. But still, it's a hell of a lot better. Scott Melker made the point this morning. He said, "Yeah, you know, he was a creditor at Voyager," and he goes, "So Voyager was stupid, but as far as so far, no one's been charged with anything criminal." And Voyager creditors got back 20 to 30 cents on the dollar. Whereas Celsius and FTX, it was, well, in one case convicted as criminal, and the other accused, and the trial's, I think, going to be in September, as being criminal, and they're getting back most of their dollar value. So he's trying to figure out the justice in the universe. But
not all of it. The most outrageous part of the Celsius distribution is that Celsius has paid over $4.5 billion to U.S. authorities, and they're only paying back $3 billion to their creditors. I mean, who are these guys really protecting?
well,
That's
we could go on. We could go on that subject, and we all know if you want to set me off on a rant about regulation, I think that the most important point is that, you know, and probably the last thing, there's still arguments going on about, you know, we talked about last week, the Coinbase case and what the SEC is doing. But there have been a lot of stories this week, everything else, about the SEC running into trouble in the courts. The simple fact is, if you want to protect investors, you focus on fraud, you focus on misinformation, you focus on criminal, enterprises. And this SEC has been focusing on technical violations and expanding its jurisdiction, and we hate that. But it seems like that's sort of coming to an end. And you know, like, for example, one thing that's interesting is the argument over the ETF for Ethereum. Well, there are going to be two arguments. One is on staking, and that's worth a separate conversation. But the other is, well, is the ETH future sufficiently correlated to spot? And so I did some math, and we looked at it, and we saw something very interesting. The correlation of the Bitcoin ETF to spot has gone up dramatically since the ETF happened. The variation on how much it would move away from spot, that spread that goes in and out, has dropped by somewhere between 7 and 10 times on average now that their ETF is trading. So the spreads are much less violent. And that's a very strong argument why the SEC is going to have to approve an Ether ETF. Now, whether or not people will want an Ether ETF when the SEC is probably going to stop them from getting staking rewards is a totally different matter. And it's worth talking about that with some more experts as we get closer to the March timeframe, which will be the next set of deadlines. But the fact is that the launch of the spot ETFs has decreased Bitcoin volatility and decreased the volatility of derivative products. And it's pretty hard to argue that that's anything but good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably a good time to pivot, guys. We had a big week in the markets, and I'd like to address some of the statistics that came out today for NFP. Non-farm employment change beat the forecast by almost 2x, adding around 160,000 jobs. Average hourly earnings beat forecast by 0.3%, and the unemployment rate beat it by 0.1%, where it came out as 3.7%, and the prediction was 3.8. So with all that being said, right, the dollar had a great day. The Fed said that there wouldn't be rate cuts in March. What do we think of the current state of the market, and how does equities reaching their all-time highs tie into crypto? What are you guys thinking for the next month?
Carl, why don't you go first? Because I've been talking a lot.
This guy brings up the NFP. He must be into forex trading. I mean, come on, Jacob. What do I think?
It is a big deal, but keep in mind one thing, guys, and this is important. Markets, when the Fed cuts, generally get crushed. And so forestalling rate cuts and saying the economy is able to keep going isn't the worst thing. And I will point this out every time. It's not necessarily the level of rates, it's the amount of liquidity that's flowing into the system. And there are a lot of people who think that the Fed's going to keep rates where they are, but flood liquidity to protect the regional banks, et cetera. So that's why the stock market is flat today. I mean, you would think that the bond market is signaling no rate cuts. Rates are all up across the curve.
Mm-hmm.
But you would think the stock market would be down today. Nope, not at all. And that's why. It's because people are looking at liquidity. They're not necessarily looking at the cost of capital, which we could debate as much as you want. But on Forex, it does matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Carl, what do you think that means in terms of the crypto market and maybe just some personal trades in the commodities?
Yeah, I'm not a big, fundamental guy. I look at the charts and predict up or down. Like I said, inflows, outflows haven't found equilibrium, and I don't think that the market's going to move too much until then. It's still going to just chop around in the 40,000 to 50,000 range, and until proven otherwise, that's where we'll sit. That's kind of my thesis for the time being. I think alts, when Bitcoin chops, capital just naturally rotates into, small, or I guess majors like Chainlink, like AVAX, like Solana. So we've seen them had a decent week. And maybe trickle down in some shitty coins, some Harry Potter, Shiba Inus, dog wolf hats. So,
Hey, don't make fun of dog wolf hat.
That thing is shredding.
I mean, the funniest part about all of this is, look, I'm not changing my mind. I think that we're going to flop sideways. I don't know whether it'll extend throughout February to mid-March. It wouldn't surprise me. It could happen. It might not. But the fact that we're holding at 43 and not at 38, despite all the doomsayers a week and a half ago, is extremely bullish for Bitcoin. Yeah. It absolutely is. I think that Caitlin Long put out a chart, which I'll have to find so that we can pop it up here, which is showing the small banks' balance sheets are worse today than they were before SVB went kaplooey. And that is a big deal, because effectively one of two things is going to happen. We're either going to get a wave of mergers of large banks buying up small banks at the Fed's behest, or we're going to get a massive kind of backdoor liquidity infusion into those banks, because they can't allow them to die. Most likely, some combination.
Dave, the bank that acquired Signature came out with their earnings down 56% or something like that, and that bank almost went kabloom.
As they say in Miami, no bueno. Yeah, no, not good. Their earnings were bad. There's many more non-performing loans. Estimates are about $1.2 trillion of underwaterness on commercial real estate. And look, that's money that's going to get plumped into the economy. When that happens, crypto will be a beneficiary. In fact, Bitcoin will be a beneficiary, because people see it as a hedge. It hasn't happened yet. Is it going to happen? I mean, Arthur Hayes keeps screaming it from the rooftops, and I can't remember the last time he got one of these macro trends wrong. I tend to agree. But is it going to happen now? No, probably not. Probably happen toward the end of the quarter. So you said next month. I don't know that we're going to see a lot in the next month, but we might. And if you do, it's going to be because of that.
Yeah. I would say, just looking at the markets, I think over the next month, the dollar looks like it's breaking out of the upside of that range, and all the mentions about the Fed we covered previously. I think the dollar continues to have a strong month. With that, I'm not expecting Bitcoin to plummet, but I do expect some chop and maybe some downside pressure. Also, Carl mentioned it at the beginning of our stream, but there was pretty big news in the Middle East. I just saw the one story. We'll look to confirm, but there's talks of a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. So I think gold and oil caught some pretty large bids due to that conflict. And obviously we saw oil sell off dramatically. And I think gold and Bitcoin are semi a hedge for war times or government instability. So you may see some selling pressure from that.
Yeah, I'll take the other side of that one.
Mhm.
I mean, I hope that I don't like people dying. So, and I hate making bets about, war and things where there's actual human tragedy. But the story, what's going on between us and Iran and them
Mhm.
bombing us, and is far bigger geopolitically, to be blunt, than Israel pummeling the terrorists that killed them. That's a bigger human tragedy, perhaps. But the Houthis and Iran and their proxies attacking the U.S. is a very big deal. And the fact that shipping can't go through the Red Sea is a very big deal, at
Mhm.
least without risk. So, there's a lot of cross currents there. But you're right; those are the stories that are going to drive a lot of this stuff going forward.
Yeah, it will be interesting. And I mean, do you think nowadays that Bitcoin has a strong narrative in those cases? Or you think, I mean, Carl, you mentioned in the previous one, it could go either side, but do you think war equals Bitcoin going up, or what's the price relationship?
Personally, I think it doesn't. I think Bitcoin is still an option on its own adoption. And I think that the biggest story by a mile, I mean, at least 95 out of 100, things that you would care about is, will Bitcoin adoption continue to grow based upon the fact that financial advisors can now look at it and
Mm,
now invest in it? I think that is
mhm,
still a much, much bigger deal. I mean, if you think about all the FUD that goes into Bitcoin when people want to kill it, environmental FUD, that's falling aside. There are great studies now that show how Bitcoin really helps the grid and really helps stabilize grids and helps sustainable energy. It's not even a question. And now lately they've been going after AI more than Bitcoin in terms
mm,
of electricity use, which I find funny, but it is what it is. The simple issue, biggest issue with Bitcoin is people will still talk about Satoshi's wallet and the Mt. Gox Bitcoin and that stuff. And that's
mhm,
supply. But don't kid ourselves. There's demand out there. And there's a lot of people who from the large investor side who won't buy Bitcoin because there's not enough supply. So it's not necessarily bad to have supply coming to market as long as it comes to market in a rational sense. So I just don't see the negatives. As far as geopolitics, the issue you have to look at, and this people don't realize, is, will this geopolitical event, how will it affect the third world? How many more countries will get currencies that become less reliable as a result, which will increase adoption of Bitcoin there? That becomes the real issue, because the US dollar is the world's reserve currency. There are people here investing in Bitcoin because they want to take advantage of its asymmetric return, but they're not investing in Bitcoin because they feel they can't trust the dollar to spend to denominate their salaries or their houses.
Some maxis are, but I agree with most of what you said, Dave. I think that, well, I know maxis who don't even hold dollars and just hold a Bitcoin only, and say that they have no desire to even hold it until they need to make um, a a purchase of some sort. But I agree with you. I think that any case of government instability is bullish for crypto. That's just plain and simple. I mean, once you distribute the power to the people, that's what Bitcoin is and stands for, and any sort of government geopolitical instability is bullish in general.
Yep. Okay, I think it's time to wrap up. Prediction time. I guess Carl, you and I both said we'd flop sideways this week, and it more like
That's what I do. Yeah, that's my
yeah.
take.
Jacob actually was more bullish last week than usual, and it was up. So okay, maybe take the win, although it didn't go crazy yet. What are you thinking this week, Jacob?
Not to be too much of a opposite or bipolar, but I'm completely flipped. I'm short right now. I think it's terrible. I think dollar up, Bitcoin down. I think we see a retest of the lows, and I think all coins get decimated this week. At least I hope.
At least I hope.
Carl.
Yeah, I mean, just flat, and then yeah, that's how
I see us in a range too. I'm not going to lie. I think that that the tests of each time it's tested the lower end of that retracement band at being 38 and 39, it's been pretty strong.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of dip buyers who are just kind of waiting for it to get there, and so many people are like Jacob thinking the same thing, that I always want to be contrarian. It doesn't make any sense for it to rally in the next week, but my gut is telling me that there's better chance of that than it falling below the lows. So, I guess if you put a gun to my head, I'd say I think we might start looking at towards the test of the recent high at 48 is possible, only because I want to be contrarian. And not because I have any particular belief that this market is ready to do anything. I think some more consolidation theoretically should be in the cards.
Time will tell.
Time will tell. Well, anyway, as usual, guys, hit the like button, subscribe, etc. Comments are always welcome, and we'll see you next week.